I want to make my own fantasy movie. I don't really have a good intro other than that, so we're just going to leave it there. For some context, I've been thinking about this idea for this movie, this fantasy movie, for a very long time, like a while. And I've been writing down some ideas here and there. I've just been, thinking of these images and the storyline and the plot and all that sort of thing. But it's just kind of lived in my mind. And I've never really had the ability or intention of doing anything with it because I am not an artist, I'm not a designer, I'm not a videographer, or any of those things. I'm just someone who likes and enjoys movies, fantasy content, all of that. And I wanted to be able to turn this into a reality. And so I've decided to try my hand at it, do the best that I can. And I am, like I said, not an artist. This is not my forte, but with the help of AI tools, it looks like a lot of things are possible. Now, I don't really like AI per se. There's a lot of problems in that space, and I get that. But I think from a creative standpoint, just the ability to make and see what you have kind of in your mind come to life, I do think there's a lot of benefit in the realm of creation there. And eventually, maybe down the road, if this gains enough traction, I'll be able to help hire some animators and make this a reality. But for now, this is just going to be my journey of trying to make this as real as possible. And I hope you find that interesting. If you do, then I hope you'll continue watching and keep watching some more videos. And I'll continue to kind of talk through my thought process of how this is going to go as I'm designing this. But other than that, I don't really have a plan for this. This is kind of my first hand at making something, creating something. I'm not a YouTuber or content creator. So this is just kind of doing my best. And to start off, I want to give a little bit of context for the scene that you are seeing here. In this world, the way that I see it, it kind of follows the typical fantasy tropes of having multiple races. You've got the humans, the elves, the orcs, and all of that, dwarves, gnomes, fairies, kind of your usual fantasy creatures. And so this here that I'm focusing in on, this is going to be the main place for the humans. I see them kind of incorporated into the valleys in between the mountains, kind of the space that not a lot of the other uh, species are utilizing. Because in this world, the humans are kind of the last ones to come. All the rest of the races have already been established for millennia, for hundreds of thousands of years. And so the humans are kind of the last ones to have been created by their god. And so they kind of have what's left of the land, which is kind of these spaces in between the existing lands. And so this is my first idea for probably the main township, and it would be kind of a simple township, very medieval looking. It's got those houses of stone and wood, farmland in between, and just kind of simple, kind of plain, nothing too crazy about it. And the reason why is because a lot of my creative direction from D&D. I play D&D quite a bit. I got a lot of friends that I play with that introduced it to me a few years back, and I have loved it. And one of the things, one of the tropes that everyone always jokes about is like the human fighter being just the most basic of basics. And it's just the go-to first character that you play just because it's easy, it's simple, and everybody knows a human fighter, right? And they're not really heralded as being these interesting creatures because in the world of fantasy, right, you have so many other options for things you can play as that the human fighter just feels basic. And I actually really want to play into that trope. And I really want to kind of hone in and make the main character for this just a human fighter. And the interesting thing in this world is that humans don't have any magic. Being the last race, they really kind of missed the boat on that one, and so they don't have access to the magic that all the rest of the races do, right? Like the elves, the orcs, the dwarves, the gnomes, they all have magic, their own kind of magic, but the humans they just don't. And so I really want to play into that kind of bare bones, basic human fighter type. And I think that's kind of an interesting avenue to kind of go down with this route, because obviously with fantasy, everyone is everyone is kind of rooting for all the magic, and it's really cool to see all the magic and the mages and the users of that. And there's definitely going to be a lot of that, but not from the perspective of the protagonist, who is just going to be a run of the mill human. And I think the first thing I want to do is kind of make the terrain for all of the main races that we see. So obviously one of the next big ones is going to be the dwarves. So the dwarves inhabit the mountains a lot more. And that's pretty typical, I feel like, for a lot of dwarves in fantasy, is for them to be mountain dwellers. And so I'm going to stick with that. Look, I'm not going to go against the tropes here. I like it. I think it works. I like seeing their tunnels and their big cities bore out of a mountain, and I just think that's cool. So we're just gonna kind of make the dwarven city stronghold within the mountains. All right, let's start with that. Let's see kind of what that generates us. That's kind of what I picture it being. Yeah, kind of like this, where where you've got the holes are kind of dug into the side of the mountain, and then the deeper you go, that's when you get into the mines. But here, it's all a bunch of stonework. You got your blacksmiths and your shops and these pathways that are all interconnected. I actually like that quite a bit. Yeah, this one too. Oh, this one's actually even better. So deeper you go, you've got the mine going all the way down, which is incorporated into the city. You've got the big kind of walkways, and then you've got the homes and everything kind of up here. You got the homes. That would be really cool. And then, of course, the top of the mountain. Actually, I really like that for the dwarves. So yeah, I think that that's a good starting point for the dwarven home. All right, next I actually want to go on to the orcs. Because the orcs in this one, I do want to branch off a little bit from the norm. I think a lot of times in fantasy, the orcs are kind of these ugly, brutish, warmongering types that are a little more on the evil side. And a lot of people tend to see them that way. And they don't have like a real home, because they're just kind of in the fires of destruction or bred for war or whatever. They're nomadic types. There's a lot of different representations of orcs that I've seen in media, but I actually want to go a little bit of a different direction, because for me, I feel like the orcs make sense as a very nature-based species. They've got kind of those tusks like the wild boar. They've got that green skin, which blends in very nicely into the forests. And so I actually see the orcs being a little more of the shaman, druidic type, naturally being a little more tied to the forests, to the jungles, to the wildlife, and being a little bit more tribal. You know, a lot of their exports, like if the dwarven exports is a lot of stonework, I see the orcs exports being a lot more of like the nature, the hides and the woodworking, and yeah, like that, those animal skins, leopard skins, whatever. And then kind of that natural magic healing. That's kind of where I see the orcs in this world. And so that's kind of the direction I want to go for this, the orc world. Let's start with that. So again, yeah, I see him kind of being a lot more one with nature, one with the animals of the jungle, more protector types. The dwarves are more the ones that I see being kind of like that earthen, artisan stonework type, and very focused on creation magic and shaping magic. So let's see what we've got here for the orcs. Yeah, actually, oh, that's actually really cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, so they got the animal hides, and they got kind of these wooden jungle, more tribal type of homes. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Next, I want to talk about the gnomes. They're going to have a really important part in this story. And the gnomes I actually see as being a little bit more, this is going to sound cheesy, they're going to be a little more nomadic. Okay, the gnomes don't necessarily have huge sprawling cities like a lot of the other races do. I see the gnomes as kind of having their own space, right? Their own space that they inhabit and they work on. Because for me, what makes a gnome is that tinkering, is that creation aspect of having an obsession and a project that you have to be working on. And so gnomes will end up wherever the gnome feels like they're working on their project, their calling. Um, and that's kind of how I view their type of magic, is that very artificer. Oh my gosh, artificer type magic, and it's very much that tinkering creation focused, and they just have to build whatever it is that they are so passionate about. And so I see the gnomes as just kind of going to wherever they find themselves. But that being said, they still make little homes. And again, I see this as a little bit more of a designed personally based on what their obsession is. So I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here for one of the characters. The gnome, he's one of the main side characters. His name's Gizmo. He adopts the main character. I won't go into too much detail yet about the rest of that, but he adopts the main character, and his obsession is with creating what we would consider technology, right? Advancements, not magical based things, but functional mechanical based things. And so his obsession is with that kind of clockwork mechanic type shop. Oh no, have I run out of? I think I've run out of my credits for the day. I guess that's it for today then. We'll come back a little later and we'll work on some more of these parts. Okay. Well, that's it for me for right now. And yeah, we'll keep working on it. Thanks for watching, and hope you're enjoying this so far, this kind of more free-form creative process. And yeah, hope to see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Okay, so last time we left off on the gnomes, and so I just want to continue with that. Now, the gnomes, like I said, are a little bit more obsessed with their particular projects. So for this gnome in particular, it's a lot of mechanical work. Let's see what we got here. Actually, it's pretty good. We got all sorts of tools, tinkering tools. This is maybe a little too futuristic. I don't know that I necessarily want a lamp in there, but I do think that this gets the idea across. So yeah, actually I really like this. And even some of the more magical items like the dragon skull, some of the potions, because that's really what it is. It's combining the two, the magic and the machine. Let's go ahead and tackle the elves now. We might as well. So the elves I do see as being less in the kind of the jungles like the orcs, and they're going to be more in the forested areas, more in the not necessarily dense forest. Again, they're a little more populated, but the elves are the ones with like the big cities. The elves are the ones that have these large sprawls through the forest. It's very much more of the elitist type mentality for the elves. So they kind of take the best of all of the rest of the groups and turn it into their cities. So they take a lot of the stonework from the dwarves, they take a lot of the hides and kind of the animal work from the orcs, they take a lot of the tinkering and the technology from the gnomes, and then from the humans, they actually don't take too much because they really don't like the humans, but we'll get into that a little bit more. Yeah, so I like this image of kind of the trees, and then you see these large elven buildings kind of poking out through it, and you can kind of tell that there's this large city, but you don't get the full majesty until you enter the forest, and then you can see all of the buildings intertwined with the trees and these beautiful works of stone intermixed. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty darn good. Yeah, yeah, a lot like this. Okay, there we go. So yeah, many of the buildings are kind of poking up through the tree line, but then you also see in the tree line a lot more of the homes and the sidewalks and the walkways. Oh, I like that a lot. And it looks like it should be the best of all of the cities to live in, but we'll get to why that may not necessarily be the case in a little bit. But externally, like image wise, it just looks like it would be the best. But I actually want to jump into the characters now. I think it's about time we start introducing some of the characters. I haven't finalized a lot of the names yet for these characters. Uh, Even though I like some ideas, I haven't quite finished working on the names yet. And that I hope will come to me in a little bit. But I want to start with the main character. And like I said at the beginning, this is going to center around a human and this very magic heavy world. And here, humans do not have any magic. So, how the lore goes, what I see is that all of these other races, they all have their own god, right? These gods all stand at the pantheon, and they are kind of the progenitors of these individual races. But the god of the humans was a little late to the party of creation by several millennia. And so the rest of the gods all got to pick their race and their magic and their areas, and they all got to choose kind of this influence that they have. But the human god was late to the party and didn't really get to choose any of that. And so they were just left with whatever space was left. And they didn't get any of the magic. And so instead, what the human god did is they gave the humans shorter lifespans but faster reproduction and the ability, instead of magic, the ability to create and progress very rapidly through inventions. So like the gnomes, they are also kind of these creators, these tinkerers. The dwarves, they also build and they mine and they develop. They all do, but the humans really have this drive and this desire for progress and for building and creating and growing and developing as fast as they can. And so that's why the human villages, even though they're only, 1,000 or so years old, the humans have developed and caught up pretty quickly to the rest of the races. And it seems pretty obvious that they're going to pass the rest of the races in terms of technology pretty quickly. And because the gnomes tend to be self-tinkering, right? They're just focusing on their own projects. They become obsessed with their own, but the humans are very collaborative. And they're building these large cities together. They're rapidly growing these empires. And it's actually becoming a little bit of a threat to the rest of these magical races. And the way that I see this is that all of these races have a council, right? They all have this magic council. There's a head wizard, if you will, and they all gather together to discuss what is going on among their groups and their cities, and they try to come together to have peaceful relations and trade and organize things and prevent wars and troubles from brewing, and just essentially ensure the survival and the growth of all of these different groups. But the humans growing and developing as fast as they are, the elves in particular do not like that, and they feel very threatened by these humans, and they kind of present this to the rest of the magical groups, and they're like, hey, even though these humans don't have any magic, they do still pose a very large threat to us if they ever decide to continue, if as they grow, they ever decide to turn on us. And so we should be the first ones to strike, and we should just eliminate all of the humans altogether. And the other groups, the other leaders, started to kind of see that and started to agree. And it began this mass genocide of all of the humans in all of the land. And huge, huge war, right? I'm talking like a decades long war against the humans. And the human cities, kind of as we saw, that were kind of everywhere all over the land, just wherever there was space, they were getting taken out one by one. And this decade-long war eventually culminated in the complete extinction of the humans, except for our main character. And the reason why this person survived is because they were taken in by this gnome, these gnome parents who took sympathy on the child after the destruction of their town, and they magically hid this child in their workshop from the prying eyes of the wizards and from the prying eyes of any of the other magical users. So they were able to hide this child and raise them. And again, in the world, in this world, everyone's living for hundreds of years. So the human being there and growing up for like 10, 15 years was hardly a blink of an eye for most of these other races, but for the human, it was most of his lifespan. And he spent that time learning and building at the hands of this gnome couple and building his own technology. Right, he doesn't have any magic, but he does have this aptitude for learning, and that's kind of the central point of this. Is I wanted to take that human fighter spirit, that the identity of just the individual human fighter that lacks any real skills or wow factor, and then really just pit them up against all of these magical folks with abilities that are kind of crazy, and seeing how ingenuity can win the day rather than just using relying on magic, and how sometimes relying on magic can make these people lazy and incapable. But this human who is just, at it's the ultimate underdog story in a way, right? This human who has nothing but their wits about them, the help of their gnome adopted parents, and whatever technology they can build. How are they going to come up with ways to fight back against the magic, these magical users, and try to, either just survive or thrive, or try to overtake the council, the magic council. We'll get to more of that a little bit later, but I wanted to give some back story, some thoughts on how I see this character developing. So I don't have a name set for this character. I'm thinking about something like maybe Jackson. I like just a very human name. Or maybe I take Jackson, I just go something simpler like Jax. Uh, but I want a very human name for this guy because he's just regular old Joe, um, in this magic world. But I see him as being this human male. We'll make him tall. Why not? We'll. I feel like every guy main character has to be at least 6'2". I I can't explain it, but I feel like if they're not, they just feel really short, and so I have to buy into that. That's taller than I am. He's got to be. He's got to be at least 6'2". And then I'm gonna actually take a page out of. I, I hate to say this. I'm gonna take a page out of the what is it? Girl book talk, uh, romantasy novels, because in those ones I haven't read any myself, but from what I've heard, every like guy character, like every hot guy in there has got like dark hair and blue eyes. Now don't quote me on that. That may not be true, but I feel like from what I've heard, every character has dark hair and blue eyes. So we'll give him. We're gonna make this guy for all the girls out there. Okay, don't you worry. I got you. Okay, he is dark. What are we gonna say? Kind of like not shaggy, but long, dark, messy. That's a good description. Dark, messy hair and blue eyes. Obviously, working in a shop, working with a lot of mechanical stuff, he's going to have some light scarring, injuries, maybe some slight burns on his face. Again, the way that I see it, he's got his problems. As a child, he saw his parents get killed. He's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He was raised well by the gnome parents, so he's still, still a good person and all. He's not blood crazy, but he does have a bit of chip on his shoulder. I feel like I'm getting really deep into like romantasy stuff here as I'm trying to write this, and that's kind of a weird feeling. I'm not gonna lie. So here goes nothing. Here goes nothing. I hope that people don't hate on this too much. Am I just writing Henry Cavill? Is that what I'm doing? I might just be writing Henry Cavill. I don't even hate that. Again, I hate that I'm writing this because this sounds exactly like what you would see in those romantasy novels where it's like he was a tough, he would kill the whole army for her, but he had such kind eyes. Gosh, I hate that. But why does it kind of work though? Why does it? All right, I hate that it works. Yeah, okay. Frick. I'm completely straight, by the way. I feel like I just need to put that out there. Um, very straight. I need to add something here, though. He is in his late 20s. Because of course he is. Gosh, I really am just writing a smut book character. I do like this look though. Oh my gosh. Why? Why does it look good though? Why does it fit what I had in my mind? I've been talking to too many of my I've been talking to too many of my female friends about the books they read. And it's coming out now. Yeah. Yep. Well, I hope that the girlies like this one. I guess this one's for you. You're welcome. Okay. Anyway, I guess we'll leave it there, and we'll keep working on this again tomorrow. Okay. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one. Okay. Hello and welcome back. Continuing on today, I want to finish working on this main character. So one thing here, this kind of makes him look a little bit older than he would actually be. He's probably going to be more in his mid 20s, early mid 20s. So let's start with that. And then I also want to talk a little bit more about his gear. So he's a knight of sorts, right? He's a human fighter. He's going to have armor, but I like this idea of him not being just like a knight in full plate armor. It's a little more strapped together pieces wise, right? He's had to build this himself because obviously he lives with gnomes. None of them have stuff that fits him. You can't get it from the elves or the dwarves because they hate humans, so he can't even show his face. So he has to kind of make this armor himself. And so I like the idea of it being practical, but also not very well put together. It's not shiny. It's not new in any regard. It's just worn and tried and true. And it's kind of scrapped together from pieces that he's found. So let's kind of start with that. That's a long. I don't even know if this is going to get the general idea. So we will just start with that and see how it goes. So yeah, I see him as kind of having more stuff that's put together. Okay, I didn't quite want to have his abs like that. That's not really what I meant. Uh, but this is kind of the gist. All right, yeah, this kind of makes sense. He's got like a solid breastplate. He's got lots of pouches and kind of these straps for holding gear. He's got a solid helmet. I see it a little more coverage, perhaps. I actually kind of like this look at the one shoulder plate and then the fur on the other side. And then he's got like his forearm guards and gloves. And then, yeah, he's just kind of got the most important parts of the armor, but not fully covered in plate because he's still, again, he can only find so many pieces. So he only has so many materials to work with. But also, he doesn't really like this heavy armor stuff because he's fighting against wizards who are very fast at shooting off spells, and so he needs to be pretty mobile. He actually, if anything, I guess he's got a little bit of rogue in him, but he still needs to be pretty mobile. And yeah, and that's kind of what this armor is for. It's designed purely for practicality, not necessarily for the hotness factor of having his abs out. That was maybe my bad for saying the abdominal exposed. But yeah, here we go. Okay. A little bit younger. Someone in his mid 20s, still working in the shop. Honestly though, this is a good general idea. And I'm just gonna name him Jax for now. Okay, and I totally forgot about the gloves. So let's make some adjustments here. I wanted to cover a little bit more around his face. So if he's taking any side blows, fully covers his jaw. Okay. Yeah, other than that, I kind of like this asymmetrical look. The rest of that's good. We just need to adjust that. Bring this helmet down a little bit. And we're not doing the whole shaggy hair coming through. Like it needs to fully cover his head. Yeah, let's see what that gets us. All right, that's a little better. Yeah. Except this one doesn't have the top of his head at all. Okay, but that does kind of cover the cheekbones, the side of the jaw, like I was talking about. All right, that's something. That's nice. It's an improvement. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit more what I'm talking about in terms of the helmet, but the armor's perhaps a little bit too thick there. Again, it needs to be a little more scrappy, but I do like the combination of these two. This really highlights what I'm talking about. Like, he's got a lot of little trinkets in gear, and that'll be important for later because his whole MO is being this fighter that is very practical and using the materials and the elements that he has because he doesn't have magic, so he's got to use what he's got. Okay, now the next character. She's going to be an interesting one. I also want to specify this is not going to be a love interest for him. This is not a love story. They'll be kind of more good friends, good banter, kind of a little bit of enemies to friends, not enemies to lovers. I think that trope is really overdone, and I think it'd be nice to have a little bit more representation of just good, healthy friendships in movies and media. And so I want to focus more on having a solid relationship that isn't romantic. I understand for all the romantasy people out there that might be not the right move, but I think that for this it makes the most sense if they're just working together, helping each other out, becoming good friends, and that's kind of more the route that they go, but there doesn't need to necessarily be any romance between them. Maybe I'll change my mind down the road, but for now, that's the route that I'm going. Okay, so the interesting thing about this second main character is that she is actually half human. She is a half elf, and that is a very big no-no in this world, especially after this genocide of the humans. She's a very much an outcast, but she's not like public enemy number one like a full human would be, because she still is part elf, and so she does still have some of that status, which prevents her from being, just killed on sight. But nevertheless, she would be bullied and cast out of most circles, not have really any friends, and that's why I see her as kind of being more of like your classic ranger archetype of person. She's very nomadic. She is one that kind of more lives off the land, and she just goes about her business because she doesn't really have any friends. Very much, again, that Ronin ranger type where she's just kind of self made and has really come into her own because of that. So, one of the defining characteristics is that she has those shorter elf ears because she's half human, and that's how everyone knows just by looking at her that she's not fully an elf. And that's one of the biggest sources of her prejudice is her ears, the fact that she's half human, and also the fact that she doesn't have kind of this pure blonde hair that a lot of the elves have. And that's something that I, again, am kind of playing with. I like this idea that the elves, all of them just have that kind of very stereotypical pure blonde hair that's in a lot of fantasy books. It's kind of very stereotypical of the elves to kind of have this perfect image. And I really want to play into that a little bit. And so, being half human, she doesn't have perfectly blonde hair either, or the perfect ears or whatever. She's got dirty blonde, kind of brown hair and slightly brown eyes, which is, again, another clear giveaway that she is not fully an elf. I will say hazel eyes, because that's kind of a nice mix of the green eyes that elves would have and kind of the brown eyes that you might see in humans. So we'll go with kind of a hazel eye. She's pretty tall, but she's not as tall for elf standards, right? If like elves are very tall and very lanky, she's going to be a little bit shorter because she's got some human in her. So she's probably, more on the side of like 5'10. Still very tall, but not super tall like a lot of the elves are. I'm not going to break the mold too much here on the ranger stereotype. She wears hoods. She's got a lot of more drapey cloaks, and also carries a bow and arrow. Like, I'm not going to break the mold too much here. If anything, I kind of want to play into it a little bit more, but I want to give some context as to why she is this way. and a lot of it is because she's trying to hide her hair and her ears, and she has like a slight mask that covers her eyes. She can use magic partially because she is an elf, so she does have some magic, but she can't use it nearly as well or as often as real magic users because she's only half blood. And this is kind of where I'm getting the idea of the half caster from. Like rangers are in D&D a half caster, right? They can use spells but limited, and they don't develop their spells nearly as fast, the spell levels. And I want to play into that here with the idea being she's a half caster, not because she's a ranger, but because she's a half elf. And so she does have some magic, but it's not nearly as strong or as far along as her fellow elves would be. So that's why she uses a bow and arrow for most of her, day-to-day work, hunting animals or whatever. She uses a bow and arrow just because she doesn't have nearly as strong a magic as others would to take care of things. I don't have a great name. Um, so if you have any good name ideas, any good name suggestions, let me know. Yeah. Okay, there we go. I was more hoping for something that covers the eyes. But yeah, that's kind of the gist. Actually, that's pretty good. Yep. And kind of some dark greens and some leathers. Yeah, okay, that's kind of more what I mean. Like a mask like this that just kind of covers the eyes. Obscures, not covers the eyes, but like obscures the eyes a little bit more. So that people who are looking at her can't really tell what she looks like. Yeah, all right, there we go. We got our classic ranger type look. Love it. All right, well, that's all I've got today. We made a few more good images, the characters, and we're making some good progress. Yeah, okay, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good day.